Welcome to Libeth. The structure of the Hojoki is deceptively simple. It moves from disaster to withdrawal to self-interrogation, but every movement deepens the philosophical problem rather than resolving it. The book begins with the instability of the external world, narrows into the architecture of the hut itself, and finally turns inward toward the instability of the mind. What makes the Hojoki extraordinary is that its structure behaves like an argument. Each section becomes evidence for the next, until the text arrives at its final unsettling possibility. Even the desire to escape attachment may itself become another attachment. The Hojoki is a short text that does an unusual amount of work in a small space, and part of understanding why it continues to matter is understanding how it is built. Not because the structure is complex. It is actually very simple, but because the simplicity is deliberate, and the deliberateness is itself part of the argument. The book is organized the way the hut is organized. Nothing is there that does not need to be there, and everything that is there is load-bearing. It begins with an image. The flow of the river is ceaseless, and its water is never the same. Foam gathers in pools at the side of the current, and while it seems to form and to persist, it is always dissolving and always reforming. Nothing holds. People and their houses are the same, Chōmei says. The person who was born in the morning may be dead by the evening. The house that stood when a person was young may not stand when they are old. The world and the person move together in parallel impermanence, neither stable, neither fixed. This is the opening, and it is already the conclusion. Everything that follows is not an argument building toward this point, but an elaboration of it, a body of evidence offered in support of something stated immediately and completely at the beginning. This matters structurally, because it means the text is not organized as a mystery moving toward a revelation. The revelation is the first sentence. The question becomes, how do you live knowing this? What do you do with the ceaselessness? The 5 disasters, the autobiography of diminishing houses, the hut, and the final self-interrogation are all answers to that question, or more precisely, stages in working through it. The form follows the logic. Start with the condition of reality, then watch it demonstrated, then find a practice that corresponds to it, then interrogate the practice honestly. The first major section is the disaster catalogue, and it deserves more attention than it typically gets, because it is easy to read it as throat-clearing. The historical context before the real philosophical content begins, and that reading misses what it is actually doing. The 5 disasters that Chōmei records are not illustrations of impermanence. They are impermanence, instantiated in specific events with specific dates and specific human costs, described with a precision that refuses to let the reader aestheticize them into something more comfortable than they are. The Great Fire of 1177 began in the southeast of the city and moved with the wind through the noble districts, consuming the palace and reducing a significant portion of Kyoto to ash. Chōmei notes that rank offered no protection. The mansions of the powerful burned alongside the houses of commoners, and the wind that carried the fire did not distinguish between them. The whirlwind of 1180 was smaller, but described by Chōmei as terrifying precisely because of its arbitrariness. It touched down in the middle of the city and destroyed buildings in a pattern that had no correspondence to wealth or status or any other human category. The attempted capital relocation of 1180, during the early chaos of the Genpei War, produced a kind of secondary disaster. Buildings half dismantled, goods piled in the streets for transport to the new location, the old capital already degrading while the new one barely existed. And then the reversal, the government's retreat to Kyoto, with the city damaged from both directions. The famine of 1181 and 1182 killed tens of thousands, and Chōmei's account of it is the most harrowing section of the text. He counts bodies. He records specific details with the stillness of someone who has chosen not to look away. The man and the child found dead together, starvation visible in their bodies. The city streets full of the evidence of a failure so total that the normal social mechanisms for responding to death, burial, mourning, continuity, had broken down entirely. And the earthquake of 1185, which ends the catalogue, is the most extended and in some ways the most philosophically precise description. The ground itself moving, the basic assumption of physical stability revealed as an assumption, the world shaking from the bottom. The function of this catalogue is not emotional. It is epistemic. Chōmei is establishing a foundation of evidence. This is what the world is. Not what it might become under bad circumstances, not what happens when something goes wrong, but what it is, demonstrably, by the record of his own eyes. The disasters are not aberrations. They are the pattern made visible. And if you have genuinely taken that in, if the catalogue has done its work on you, then the withdrawal that follows is not eccentricity or defeat, but a rational response to an accurate description of reality. The housing autobiography that follows the disaster catalogue is one of the most structurally elegant things in Japanese literature, and it is almost never discussed in those terms. Chōmei traces his successive dwellings from his family home through a series of progressively smaller and more peripheral residences, each representing a further removal from the center of Kyoto and its social world. Each house is smaller than the last. Each is further from the court, the shrine, the network of poetic exchange and social obligation. And each move, described in the spare physical language that characterizes the text, is simultaneously a spiritual event, a reduction, a clarification, a release of something that had been held. The autobiography of houses is a philosophy of detachment told through architecture rather than abstraction, which is exactly the right method for a text that distrusts abstraction. The argument is made in dimensions and directions, this far from the center, this small, this simple. By the time Chōmei arrives at the description of the 10-foot hut itself, the reader has been prepared to understand it correctly. It is not poverty. It is not failure. It is precision, the result of a long process of reduction that has arrived at the minimum, at what remains when everything that is not necessary has been removed. The description is loving and specific. 10 feet square. A certain height. The method of construction. The wooden frame that can be disassembled and moved. This detail is crucial because it means the hut itself is non-binding, that even the house that represents the endpoint of the reduction is not attached to the ground. Its contents, a folding organ for music, a collection of poetry, Buddhist images, an almanac. These are not random survivals. They are chosen. They are the minimum of beauty and practice, what a life oriented toward meaning rather than accumulation actually needs. The garden outside, tended but not owned. The mountain landscape, present and seasonal, offering beauty that comes and goes with the year. The description of the hut is followed by an extended account of the pleasures of the life within and around it, and this section has a quality that is easy to misread. It is genuinely serene. The seasonal rhythm, spring blossoms, summer cuckoos, autumn moon, winter snow, is described with an attention and a delight that has no irony in it. The music played alone, the poetry read for its own sake rather than for social advancement, the walks in the hills, the small routines of a life organized around the immediate. All of this is presented as sufficient, as more than sufficient, as a fullness that the larger life never achieved. The section is beautiful in the way that a passage of music is beautiful when it reaches the resolution it has been building toward. And then the reversal. The final section is short, abrupt, and structurally decisive. Chōmei turns the question on himself. He has been writing as someone who has found the answer, the small house, the reduced life, the acceptance of impermanence, and now he asks, is his love of the hut another form of the attachment he left the world to escape? The music, the poetry, the view, do these pleasures constitute an obstacle to the Buddhist liberation he sought? The unnamed companion who shared some of his mountain years, is the affection for this person the same human bond that the withdrawal was supposed to release? He asks these questions. He does not answer them. The text ends with an invocation of Amida Buddha, the figure of compassionate Buddha in whose name salvation is sought. But the invocation comes after the doubt, not before it, and it does not resolve the doubt. The final gesture is not resolution. It is honesty about the lack of it. This ending is what makes the Hojoki something other than a self-help text or a spiritual manual. A text that ended in resolution. I withdrew, I simplified, I found peace, I am free would be consoling and false. Chōmei's version ends in the acknowledgement that the project of detachment, however sincerely pursued, leaves residue. That the self persists in what it loves. That even the most carefully constructed simplicity can become something one does not want to lose. The book does not say this is disqualifying. It does not say it makes the project worthless. It says, this is what I have found, including this last uncomfortable finding, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. The omissions in the text are as meaningful as the inclusions. The poetry that defined his career, the specific poems, the competitions, the anthologies, is almost entirely absent. The Genpei War, which was tearing Japan apart during the years the text covers, appears only in its effects on Kyoto, never as a political narrative. Other people are almost entirely absent from the second half of the text. The world of social relationship, obligation, and exchange, which the Heian world had organized as the primary arena of meaning, disappears. These are not gaps. They are enactments. The text performs the withdrawal it describes. What it chooses not to include is the argument for what was left behind. The structural logic of the Hojoki can be stated simply. Observe impermanence directly in its most concrete and destructive forms. Trace the process by which a life is reorganized in response to that observation. Arrive at the minimum that a life requires. Discover that even the minimum is not without attachment. Acknowledge this honestly. The shape of the text is the shape of a life that has been genuinely examined. And the ending is honest because genuinely examined lives do not resolve cleanly. They arrive at better questions, not final answers. The brilliance of the Hojoki's structure lies in how completely form and philosophy become inseparable. The 5 disasters establish impermanence as empirical reality. The shrinking houses transform biography into spiritual movement. The hut embodies the possibility of sufficiency. And the final self-questioning prevents the entire text from becoming ideological certainty. Chōmei does not conclude with enlightenment or triumph. He concludes with doubt. That refusal to simplify the problem is precisely what gives the work its authority. The Hojoki survives because it never pretends human beings can fully free themselves from attachment simply by changing location or reducing possessions. The instability outside the hut eventually reappears inside the self. That's all for today on Libeth. One new book every week. At least we try.